You're listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Kathlena the Allergy chef about how she overcame life threatening food allergies and turned that into a passion to change the world one bite at a time. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey there, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, and we've got a packed interview for you today, so I'm just going to jump straight into introducing our guest. So our guest today is Kathlena, aka the Allergy chef. Kathlena has over 200 food allergies and intolerances and even can't drink most water. The members of her household also have food allergies and special diets, none of them being the same. After being told she had 30 days to live, she made it her mission to help the food allergy and special diet communities thrive. 3 years from her lowest point, she and her team have published several cookbooks, started a bakery, done local and nationwide outreach, developed hundreds of free recipes and resources, and much more. Our conversation today definitely covered a wide spectrum of lots of different things, but I really enjoyed it. And I think one of the things you'll take away from this episode is how important it is to persevere towards your goals in the face of really severe challenges. I mean, just the fact that Kathlena couldn't even drink water is just shocking. So I know you're going to love this interview. It really was inspiring for me as someone, not someone who has food allergies, but someone who has her own day-to-day life challenges that she's working to overcome. And I think even if you don't have food allergies, you're really going to appreciate Kathlena's perspective on life. So without further ado, here is Kathlena the Allergy chef. All right, everyone. Well, I am so excited to have with us on the show today, Kathlena the Allergy chef. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Kathlena.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to chat. I was looking over your information ahead of the call today, and some of it sounds really shocking. So I'm excited to hear your story. And for our listeners that have not been introduced to you yet, I guess we can just jump straight into the 30 Days to Live story, because I feel like it sounds like that is really what created your mission and the way that you help people. So do you want to just dive straight into the juicy stuff?
Yeah, let's do that, right? Forget the appetizer. So in a nutshell, well, not free nutshell, I have more than 200 food allergies and food intolerances. I can't drink most water. I have contact and airborne allergies. And yes, I was given 30 days to live. So a little bit about that. It was during the diagnosis process itself. And things just kept getting worse, getting worse, getting worse. You know how it goes, right? You get way worse before you even get a hint of better. And I experienced a point where essentially consuming cane sugar had triggered wasting. I don't know if you're familiar with wasting, but wasting is the process of losing weight rapidly, like 30% of my body weight in 30 days or less. Like it was pretty rapid. And it was also simultaneously at a point where I couldn't consume more than about 2 ounces of water in a day, because drinking water was like swallowing razor blades. It was incredibly painful. And on average, I'd eat about half an avocado a day. That was all I could tolerate. And so, yeah, like I deteriorated to the point where they were just like, you're going to be dead in 30 days. And honestly, I was totally cool with that. I was like, okay, cool. Because at least now there's like a timeline for me. Like I know when my suffering will end. This is great. Right. Made the most of my 30 days, right? Made sure the kids had a great time. And like, we lived in a really dirty house because it was like, I'm not going to clean anything. I'm just going to focus on everybody having fun. Like your priorities absolutely change. Right. Even, it's so interesting. One of the most interesting traits, qualities, whatever you want to call it, long lasting effects of going through all of this I can't sit through most TV shows or like movies anymore, especially movies. I fast forward through them. And people are always like, what? I'm like, listen, when you've lived a point where you've got 30 days to live, everything's got to be like this, right? Like, let's move it, let's move it, let's go. We got things to do and places to be, you know? And so you don't waste any of your time. And I don't know, it kind of changes you over time. But anyway, that's a whole different story. So I was randomly looking for water one day because, like, I mean, water was really the issue. You know, when you can't touch anything, when you can't drink anything, like it's not that I had a condition so awful that it was going to kill me. It was the lack of being able to even consume water, right? And then, of course, you know, when you have a severe allergy to corn and everything is contaminated with corn and you can't get a pure version of anything, so everything is making you sick and sicker. That was the real issue. So when I actually found a water company in Washington State, and they took water off of a mountain, like Snowcap Mountain. And I was like, oh, this should work, except I had missed the season by like 2 weeks. They had stopped taking orders. And I was like, oh, well, that's sad. And then I found the one, right? The one thing where God was like, here, take this. And it's called Raw Water Summit Spring. They're in Maine. They have the only exemption in the United States to not treat the water. Well, it turns out I'm not allergic to water. In fact, a couple of specialists thought I had a true water allergy. I actually don't. I am allergic to the processing of water. Okay. And so even when you think you're buying bottled water, you're really buying processed water. So these guys have the only exemption in the country to not treat the water. And for the first time I took a sip of water and I wasn't swallowing razor blades, and it was like, oh, well, now this is interesting. Now the owner, Brian, coolest guy you'll ever meet. I always tell anybody who hears my story, like, at least just go like their post on Instagram, right? Like, these guys are so cool. He actually, when he heard my story, he was like, okay, well, I'm going to send you water in glass and plastic, just in case you can't have the plastic water, but the glass bottles work out because, you know, corn and plastic and all that stuff. But it worked out. And he'd even at first was thinking, well, maybe we'll send you a pallet of water, you know, to figure out like how much water you consume, all that sort of stuff. Turns out I don't like it took a long time to ramp up to being able to, you know, drink water again. Um, and so, yeah, that's what I did. And through his water, like by the grace of God, everything changed, right? You know, 30 days come and go, and you're like, you're checking your watch. You're like, it's been 30 days, guys. What's going on here?
Mhm.
60 days rolls along, and you're like, you know, I think they were wrong or things have changed. And that's when I knew it was like everything inside of my head has to be somewhere else to help other people, right?
Mhm.
Because by that point, it was like I had all these recipes in my head and cookbooks in my head and all this information in my head, and it had to go somewhere, right? And so that really, like you said, that's the beginning of the mission where it's like, okay, well, now it's time to change the world. I didn't
Yeah.
die. And now I'm just going to change the world one bite at a time.
Wow. I feel like I got to wrap my brain around this because it's like I'm trying to imagine how how that happens, right? Where you literally can't even drink water. Was it something? Well, first of all, how old were you when this was happening?
Oh, 20s, I guess. I had to be in my 20s. Yeah.
Yeah. So up to
Timeline gets a little murky for me.
yeah.
Not gonna lie.
That's okay. I feel like now that I have a baby, I don't know what day it is anymore. So it's like, I totally get
Right.
it. So before this stuff started happening, was this like a slow, like stuff started to feel uncomfortable and now, you know, all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is like peak can't eat things? Or was it like some kind of catastrophic event happened and then all of a sudden you couldn't eat food and drink water?
No, so I've been sick my whole life. I've been undiagnosed my whole life. If, you know, with hindsight being 2020 and you can look back on everything, I've been sick since day one. Um, I was considered a high risk pregnancy and all those sorts of things. Like, I am the perfect storm of awful, right? Everything that can go wrong, it had to have gone wrong. You know, I don't know enough about my biological parents to tell you more than that, but let's just say a lot went wrong. I can remember pain always as a child, especially around food. Um, I had developed a lot of childlike coping mechanisms as a kid, which presented a lot like OCD around food because nobody knew what was wrong with me. Like, trust me, I've been sick my whole life.
Mhm.
I kind of look at where I'm at now as a culmination of what happens when you take an undiagnosed person and you keep exposing them to food that causes harm. What happens to the body? I'm the answer, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's why now I advocate so hard for kids, because kids and nonverbal people literally can't tell you, hey, that food you fed me, even though it's been a couple days, I'm still hurting from that food. They
Mhm.
can't verbalize that. And so you've got pushy doctors or ambitious parents who are like, my kid can't eat these three things, but these are the three things I'm going to focus on. And it's like, why? There's
Mhm.
literally 400 other ingredients to choose from. Why does it have to be those three? Like, can't we just put those aside for now and, circle back when your kid can actually consent to trying the food?
Mhm.
Because people don't realize, just because you don't see my pain doesn't mean I'm not in crippling pain, right?
Mhm.
It's like, last year I had a friend come over to visit, and we must have sat, oh god, I guess maybe it was more than a year ago, actually. Anyways, we yeah, actually, it was more than a year ago. Okay, sorry. We sat at least 8, 9 feet apart because the, like, laundry detergent and perfume and hair, all, like, so I have a chemical issue, right? Like, I can't be around chemicals, a lot of environmental triggers, etcetera, okay? Even sitting that far apart from her, like, keeping full distance for a very long time, I was pretty much paralyzed for 24 hours afterwards. Could not
Wow.
move. And that's the thing, right? Like, I look okay on the outside, but I'm literally unable to move. And so a lot of children can't communicate this need to you, right? It's why I push so hard, and I had a friend ask recently, like, what do you think that would have looked like as a baby for you? Right. And I'm like, see, that's the thing. You could have a baby that cries all the time and people say, oh, it's a colicky baby, not realizing this is an undiagnosed food allergy or food intolerance or other medical condition. Or
Mhm.
maybe you just have a colicky baby. Okay. And then, of course, on the other side of it, you could have a very lethargic baby, not realizing that that lethargy is actually a non-traditional reaction to food. So for
Mhm.
me, there are certain foods that if I consume them, I'll pass out within anywhere between 15 minutes and an hour, like full
Wow.
on just out. Yeah. And then I'll wake up later, be completely exhausted, like I've run a marathon. And I'm like, oh man, okay, well, what made me pass out? Right.
Mhm.
Now, imagine a child who just takes naps all the time.
Mhm.
Some parents don't see the connection. And so it's why I'm always telling people, like, if you even suspect anything, first and foremost, don't feed your kid around nap time. Change the eating schedule completely. Because if your kid has just woken up, they've been awake for 30 minutes, and then you feed them and they're out again, that's a problem. That's
Mhm.
not a normal reaction to food, right? But if it's too close to nap time, we're just thinking, oh, it's nap time, not realizing our kid has a problem.
Mhm.
So, and that's not to say every person goes through this, right? I am the exception to the rule. I recognize that. I am the extreme, like, case.
Yeah.
But in being the extreme case, it gives me way more insight than any one person really could ever have. I mean, we have so many people that approach us for help because they're like, you actually know more than our doctors do. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, like, I'm sorry that your doctor doesn't know this much, but
Mhm.
that's pretty cool that I can offer that insight. But it's only because I've walked this journey, right?
Mhm.
It's because they're working with professionals who have no firsthand experience. It's not that they don't want to help. It's that they literally don't know how, right? The
Mhm.
literature isn't there to back it up. And unfortunately, these kind of conditions, it is quite literally impossible and unethical to scientifically study it, because the only real study you could do is to find identical twins and essentially poison or harm one of them and not poison and harm the other to
Mhm.
figure out what happens. Well, that's incredibly unethical, right?
Mhm.
Even if people are volunteering for this, like, hard pass, no thank you. And then, of course, we say, okay, well, then let's just find everyone allergic to things and let's put them in a study. See, that's the thing. You can't. There's no one unifying trait, except for the fact that, everybody's immune system is against them. But you're looking at different genders, races, ethnicities, backgrounds, DNA, polymorphisms, all these different things. We cannot create this singular case and have an actual control, right? It's
Mhm.
why we only have the top 8 or top 9, even though you can be allergic to pretty much literally anything, right? It's
Mhm.
why we only have these general ideas like, well, boys might be more affected than girls. Or, the most interesting fact, people always think this one's interesting, but there's reason behind it. Asian boys tend to be the highest group most likely to outgrow their food allergy. it's interesting. But when we look at the diets of Asian boys who are raised in household, either with traditional Asian grandparents or first generation Asian parents or Asian parents who are really stuck in their roots, it's all about gut health, right? Those parents, whether they realize it or not, are feeding their kids gut healthy foods and they're helping repair damage. Not in all cases, because we know it doesn't apply to all children. It's why sometimes they're like these interesting therapies where people are like, oh, they're a quack, or oh, that won't work. Here's the thing, depends on how you got into the boat. If you were born first day allergic to everything, of course, some of these more different therapies aren't going to work, right? They're not designed for you.
Mhm.
But if you develop leaky gut over the course of 20 years, maybe now you've got an option, right? There's a road out of all of this.
Mhm.
If you had a sudden a sudden change, a sudden shift, something, there was a catalyst that we can definitively grab onto, there actually might be a way out, right? And so people are oftentimes looking through their own hyper individualized lens, like kind of condemning everything else. And again, that's what puts me in such a unique position because I'm like, whoa, hold on. There's this guy's story and that guy's story and this, like, and I understand all their stories. And I'm telling you, that dude's not a quack. He's just not for you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't get that. So then you end up
Well,
with these divisions and then people start arguing and there's all this infighting within the community. I'm like, hold on. Like, can we just use our collective power to like get some safe food on the table? Like,
mhm.
we don't need to argue about this.
Well, and I feel like that's really common in the just clinical space in general is people who they have a particular viewpoint and they think, well, the science supports this or this is what I was taught or this is the way that I was trained in my maybe you're a gastroenterologist or a dietitian or the different types of trainings you can go through. And I feel like it's really hard to get people to take that perspective that you were just mentioning where it's like, it's possible that this person's right for this collection of people and not right for these collection of people.
Yeah.
And I think people want it to be this like, it either is or it isn't. And, if you go and talk about stuff that's like not what 80% of the population, if it's not true for that much of the population, then it's not true at all. And it sounds like, especially in this more extreme allergy case, like the stuff that's true for you, as an example, is probably not true for 99.9% of people out there, right? Like just not being able to
Correct.
drink water. Like that's a pretty extreme reaction. And I think,
And on the water, there aren't that many of us in the world with that kind of situation,
mhm,
right? We are such a rare group. In fact, there's, I mean, you can count us on your hands and toes. It's a
mhm.
really tiny group of people,
Yeah.
you know.
Which I
Yeah.
mean, thank goodness, because that's obviously probably one of the harder things to be sensitive to, right? I mean, food, it's
Yeah.
like you have options. Water, you don't really have another option. Your body needs water, right? So I feel like it's really common for people to not believe others when they're saying something that's working for them, or even in your case, I'm
Mm.
sure I wouldn't be surprised if you had a lot of people that were like, "There's no way that what you're saying
Well,
is
it's
real."
interesting. I don't get a lot of skeptics.
Oh, really?
I've only ever met one skeptic, but he wasn't skeptical of me. He was skeptical of his friends who would be like, "Oh, I can't have this one week," and then the next week they'd eat it in front of him. And so we actually had this conversation about that, how they don't represent the true allergy community. And no, I've never had a skeptic. In fact, I said to one specialist once, I'm like, "Do you think this is all in my head?" Because one time I was reading about how some of this stuff can be like psychosomatic. Like, am I just crazy? He's like, "No, like, please don't ever think you are." Like, this is all
Yeah.
very real. I was like, "Oh, okay." And that was the last I ever thought about that. It's interesting that you say that because as a mimicker, you can actually take me to, say, the Mayo Clinic where you have a range of specialists. You can drop me off at every specialist store and they will each diagnose me with what they specialize in because
Mm.
I have so many symptoms that overlap with what they specialize in. And they'd probably be able to test for something and I'd pop positive for something, or in some cases, like say cancer, if you don't test me and only look at my symptoms and drop me off at their door, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you totally have such and such cancer. Your symptoms line up. If
Mhm.
you just cherry pick some of my data, you can diagnose me with so much. And
Mhm.
it's why I feel so loud and strong about like specialty diets when people are like, "Have you tried this diet? Oh, maybe you did it wrong. Have you done this diet? Oh, maybe you didn't do it right." Like, hello, no two people are the same. Not everything is for everyone, period.
Mhm.
That's why I'm always telling people, like, listen to you, right? Like, I've had doctors prescribe me things I'm allergic to. And before I had enough sense to really advocate for myself, because I'm great at advocating for other people, right? I was like, "Are you sure? Because I'm allergic to this ingredient." They're like, "No, no, it'll be fine. Just take it." And they insisted that we couldn't move forward with anything else until I had taken that. Well, sure enough, that nearly killed me. And I'm like, I'm done. So out. Like when they
Mhm.
don't listen and then they make you worse, because they have these ego issues or they just know that they're right. It's like the thing is one thing I've learned and I try to encourage, especially parents, right? No one is the expert the way you are, and no one is as invested as you are. Because at the end of the day, guess what your doctor does? They go home, they take off their coat, and they don't think about things. Maybe they think about their patients, but at the end of the day, they're not like, you're not their priority, right?
Mhm.
Their family, their parents and whatever, like that's their priority. You're the patient that they work with during business hours. They're not in your shoes. They haven't walked in they probably haven't even walked a day in your shoes in terms of how much physical time they've spent in the same room as you. So
Mhm.
how can they be the actual expert in you? And that's the thing. When you start recognizing that doctors work for you and you can hire and fire as you see fit and find a team of people who support you, that's when you start winning. That's when you start finding the answers. Because when you can find a doctor who says, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I'm going to help you figure it out. Whew, those are the best ones. Because
Mhm.
those are the ones who tap into their resources, who reach out to people. They're like, hey, I sent a message out to my collection of, doctor friends or whatever to see if anybody else has seen anything similar. Like those are the ones who really want to help you. So it's like, find a good doctor. Now, at the same time, though, don't see their personalities as whether or not they're good at a job. I had a friend who had like a really rough around the edges doctor, but she's like, he's the greatest doctor ever, but he's got the worst bedside manner. I was like, that's
Yeah.
hilarious. She goes,
Yeah.
a lot of patients have left him because they don't like the way he talks to them or whatever. But man, is he good at what he does. So it's
Yeah.
like, you got to be willing to give these people grace the way we want
Mhm.
grace.
Mhm.
But yeah, like that's a whole side story of doctors and what have you.
Well, and it reminds me of that, I guess it's a fable of the blind men and the elephant, right? Where it's like one is touching the tail and one's touching the side and one's got the trunk, and the one touching the tail is like, oh, it's a rope. And the one touching the trunk is, oh, it's a snake. And it's like, I feel like that happens a lot with doctors, especially because they really are trained in a specialty and that's what they see and that's what they know. And it's not to say that that's bad or wrong. It's just they will have like a lens that they're looking through, and especially with someone like you whose condition is unique and difficult to pin down, it's like you said, it's going to be, they're going to see what they're looking for as opposed to really seeing the full picture. And I kind of feel like it wouldn't be possible for anyone else except for you to really see the full picture because you're the one experiencing every second of every day of every month of every year your own body and what happens when you eat certain foods. And so I definitely agree with you that people need to believe that they are the expert of their own body and seek support and help to find the answers from professionals, but not to feel like they can't also be driving the engine here and really being the ones that are in charge of what's going
Oh,
on.
you said it so beautifully though, because you're
Thanks.
right. No, like that was bravo, like that was beautiful. That was so good. No, because it's true. And like, that's what I'm always telling people, food journals are king. I don't care because for anyone with a delayed reaction, right? So when you go in for an oral challenge with an allergist, the way we define allergy conventionally is a reaction that happens either from immediate to 4 hours. So like either you touched it or immediate ingestion up until 4 hours. After that, we call it a food intolerance. Okay. And there are specialty cases like FPIES, food protein induced enterocolitis syndrome, where the delayed reaction is still a true allergy, even though it's outside the 4 hour window, which
Hmm.
again, why you can't really study us, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so if you have delayed reactions that are actually an allergy, not an intolerance, so you go to this allergist, they give you the challenge, they even raise your temperature through exercise or whatever, just to make sure you don't have a reaction. And then that night you're vomiting profusely and then you pass out. You're still reacting. It just
Hmm.
took you longer,
Hmm.
right? But a lot of doctors, they'll see that and go, it must have been something else because you're outside the window.
Hmm.
Some of them are like really, this is the window and that's it. And there's no room for exception. And that's what bugs me so much about conventional medicine. It's like, they're like, there's a pill for every ill and, it's only this. And it's like, no, it's a lot more than that,
Mhm.
and like, let's not even forget, like, I always like talking about this, like the 5 pillars of health, right? Air, water, food, movement, and medicine. Like these 5 key things, if we're not even looking at those, and we're just like you said, looking through that lens or looking for something specific, we're never going to see the real answer.
Mhm. Well, and it's interesting because what you were saying before about doctors wanting you to try something first, I feel like that's really common in the conventional space where it's like, this is the protocol that we go through. And it was
Yeah.
funny because, I mean, this isn't totally related, but it kind of is. My husband had surgery on his spinal cord back in February. And so he was kind of like out of it when they were doing some of their checkups on him in the hospital. And so when I was there, I was asking for like help with pain medicine and that kind of thing. And I remember they were saying, okay, yeah, we're going to give him this one. And that's the next one we're going to try. And I was like, wait a second, he's taken that one before and it gave him a really bad headache and it didn't help his pain. Can we skip that? Because it's like, he's already tried it and it made things worse. So let's like not do that again. And it was really interesting because the nurse was like, well, I'm still going to prescribe it because that's the next one that we're supposed to try, but you don't have to take it. So I was like, what? Can we just skip it? Like, can we just go to the next one to try instead? And it was just like, I just feel like that's the way that the conventional medical world is set up
Mm.
now, where it's like, this is what we'd have to do. And we don't skip steps and we don't like, bypass any of our protocols. And I think it's unfortunate because I think you could get to the result a lot quicker if they would be a little bit flexible with those things and not necessarily feel like it has to go in this exact order or, I think there's a lot of liability concerns and that kind of thing, but it's just
Yeah.
really frustrating.
I'd be so frustrated if I were you because number one, you were behaving as a patient advocate, which kudos to you, right? But number two, he technically didn't even skip the step. He'd already done the step
Yeah,
and the step had
that's
failed.
true.
So it's like,
Yeah.
by definition, they weren't doing anything wrong skipping it because he'd already done it.
Yeah.
So not skipping it doesn't make sense. And that's not really patient care. That's just sticking to a protocol.
Yeah. Well, and I think unfortunately, especially in the hospital, they have like patient guidelines where if anything were to happen and they came back to that nurse and was like, well, why didn't you take that step? It's like she would have to defend herself versus saying, no, I did take the step. See, here's the prescription kind of thing. So
Wow.
and I feel like that's one of the reasons why in the health space, I'm really big into supporting entrepreneurs like yourself, because it's like, I feel like someone who's an entrepreneur that wants to do a really good job of helping people, they're able to be so much more flexible and adaptive and say what's actually working for people rather than just following these arbitrary guidelines that have been set by like an organization. And I feel like that's the kind of delivery of health services that's really going to help people get outcomes because you can just say, hey, what's working, what's not working? Like, let's train you to be the expert here and to be able to advocate for yourself and be able to make decisions that are best for you. And I think that really shortens the timeline of helping somebody figure out what to do because they're not going through all the bureaucracy of the typical
Yeah.
healthcare experience.
Yeah, no, we're pretty much on the same plane because I'm always telling people like, listen, Western medicine has its place in the world. If you're having a heart attack, do not get your essential oils. Go to the ER, right? I think there are certain conditions, oh my goodness, go. But then anytime you're dealing with chronic or ongoing issues, I feel like Western, unless you lucked out with one of the best doctors, or you sort of know what's wrong with you and they are a specialist in that, most people just get chewed up and spit out by the system. And I think someone was saying it's an average of 7 to 10 years now to get a proper diagnosis of a chronic ongoing illness in
Wow.
the Western
Yeah.
system because of like you said, right? It's these protocols. It's, try this for 3 months, then come back, right?
Hmm.
Meanwhile, patient is suffering for 3 months needlessly. And it's like, we could have just gone to step 6. Like we didn't need those first 5 steps and just threw away 15 months,
Hmm.
right? So no, oh man, it's a disaster. And the problem is like, it's only getting worse because more and more people are, it's like 1 in 3 with this and 1 in 10 with this and 1 in 5 with this. And nobody's talking root cause, which really bugs me. Like if we're not talking root cause, why are we even talking?
Hmm.
But there's so many ongoing issues that, quite frankly, don't need to exist. And it's not being handled. And then people are just being given a packet of pills and sent on their way. And it's like, this isn't care. This
Mhm.
is sick care, not health care. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Sick
Like, we're not,
management, not even care, right?
yeah, it's sick management. You're right. I like that better. That's what it is.
So I want to kind of take a sharp turn here because something that in the very short time that I've been interacting with you, I feel like I get this sense that you have a really awesome perspective in really challenging circumstances. And I
Mm.
think sometimes that can really be the difference between somebody getting better or at least, surviving, even if you don't have this like quote unquote normal life that even just being able to make it past those 30 days or being able to live a pretty normal life, even if you have to make a lot of adjustments and, you know, just live a different way, right? But you can still live your life. You're not just in like a bubble for the rest of your life, not doing anything or not having relationships or anything. So I just am curious, like, how have you always had this kind of mindset where you're just like ready to take
Yeah,
action, or
I
did
really
that
have.
develop?
Yeah. No. I guess, okay. In my older age, here's what I love to tell people. Anytime you doubt the power of your own mind, I want to remind you, look up the placebo effect. Science has proven again and again and again and again and again and again. The placebo effect is so real, right? You can give someone a sugar pill and they will literally heal. Why? Because they believe it. They literally believe that they are taking the real cure and they will heal. It's a phenomena that is so amazing. I mean, documentaries have been made about this stuff, and there's papers and studies like the placebo effect. You have that power. Now, how long have I had this power? My whole life. I grew up in an abusive environment. And so, when someone beats the crap out of you and tells you how awful you are and how worthless you are, you're either going to break, you're going to believe it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure I believe half that stuff. But there's also that part of me who's like, forget you. I'm going to prove you wrong. Right. Um, that's actually been the core of my personality my whole life, is proving people wrong and shoving it in their faces in a polite way, but still shoving it in their faces. Um, I am very blessed to have a high IQ, but it also can be, a downside. There are plenty of downsides, trust me. But like, for example, I knew this kid in high school. Actually, we knew each other in middle school. We went to different high schools. And I said, yeah, I'm going to finish high school in 3 years. And then I'm going to finish college in probably like 3 years as well. And he's like, no, you're not. Nobody's going to, you can't do that. Jimmy, I shoved it in his face. I finished high
Jimmy.
school. Jimmy. I won't say his last name just in case. But Jimmy got it shoved in his face. And he doesn't even know it was shoved in his face. That's the funny thing, right? But no, I finished college at age 19 just to prove, like, forget you, Jimmy. I can do anything. And I mean, when I was 8 years old, I figured out my whole life, right? I sat down, gave myself a life plan, knew which universities I wanted to go to. Like, who at age 8 has picked out that they're going to Harvard? Me, right? And so that is who I am at my core. Now, does that mean I'm always happy go lucky? No, absolutely not. I have a very fragmented mind in a very strange way, in that I lived with crippling suicidal depression up until my 20s because that was one of my non traditional side effects from food. Literally wanted to jump off a bridge every day. And yet at the exact same time, sitting there saying, well, I'm going to go do this thing because I'm going to shove it in everybody's face. Like, how do you have those two things coincide in one person? I don't know. I just know that that's who I am. Right. So it's interesting because, when I woke up the first time not wanting to jump off a bridge, it was like, oh, is this how normal people feel? This is so interesting, right? It was the weirdest thing. Um, and that's not to say like I'm on fire for life or anything of that nature. Like, it living that way for so long, it definitely leaves its marks on you. But at my core, I've never really changed who I am. It's like, look, you can sit here and feel sorry for yourself, or you can recognize that maybe it's not so bad. And I know part of that attitude and mindset comes from the fact that I watch way too many documentaries than anyone human ever should. Like, I don't find most television entertaining. I find it boring. But give me a good documentary, not the American ones. The Americans are very bad at making documentaries. But give me like an international documentary, and usually I'm in. And when you see the horrors that this world has to offer while you're sitting on your cushy bed, in your comfortable warm pajamas, you kind of go, I'm gonna like be grateful, right? It
Hmm.
really changes. Like, when you hear the horrors that some women go through, not even because they did anything wrong, but just because they exist. Like when you stop and think about that, like my crime was just existing. Like, my goodness, right? Like, how blessed are we to not live there,
Mhm.
and how blessed are we to have the opportunity to then change people's opinions or, influence or help or whatever, right? Like when you start looking at the world this way, like how can I be a light in the world today? How can I make a difference in someone's life today? And it's just like the little things. Like everybody thinks you have to be this big giant hero. Like, no, you don't. It starts small. Like literally at the grocery store, smile at someone. Like if you see someone who looks like really sad reading a label or whatever, smile at them, right?
Mhm.
Or if you see someone, staring at a row of products that you're hyper familiar with for whatever reason, strike up a conversation. Be like, those are the good ones. Don't eat those three because they taste like cardboard. But that one, that's the one you want. And they'll look at you and they'll thank you. And all of a sudden, you've made a difference in their day because someone took the time to look them in the eye, smile at them, give them good advice because who wants to waste money at the grocery store? Nobody. Um, like just helping the fellow person out, like it makes a difference, like a huge, huge difference. Or, if you see a little kid who's smiling at you, smile back at them. Like what does kindness actually cost you? Nothing.
Mhm.
It costs you nothing to be nice. I mean, it'll cost you something to, be active or whatever, but just plain niceties, that doesn't cost you. And that makes a big difference in the world. Like we can all make these tiny little differences because if we all did that, my goodness, could you imagine how much better the world would already be? And
Yeah.
that's before we change our diets and lifestyles. That's
Mhm.
just being nice, right?
Yeah.
Like, how much better did we already make the world? And so that's kind of my mindset. Like, can I make the world a better place? Because I know for me, I know not a lot of people like feel this, and I know a lot of people probably think I'm crazy hearing it. But when I was born, I knew I was born to change the world. I've always known that. I've known that since I was a small child. I was literally born to change the world. So for me, it's always like, is this the moment? Is this the moment I change the world? What about now? Did it happen yet? Did I change it?
That's
and,
really cool.
and I wish I were joking, but I'm not. Like sometimes, like I'll sit there and be like, did I change it yet? Or like, some cool opportunity will come up and I'll be like, is this the moment that it's going to happen? And I'll like, text somebody and be like, guess what just happened? Like that's who I am. So
Yeah.
have I always had this? I think so. I think that's just the way God made me. And like, I'm going to roll with it. And
Yeah.
hopefully I leave a mark, and in a weird way, it's like, for me, I'm always striving for crazy, wild greatness. I know not everybody loves Queen Elizabeth. I know that she was not a perfect woman, and yet she was my queen. Like I'm a British citizen at heart. I'm not a huge Charles fan. Don't get me wrong. But Queen Elizabeth was absolutely my queen. Why? She was a woman in a time where women had no position in the world. She was a mother, and she prioritized that. She showed up. She took her duty seriously, like so like responsibility is something people skirt around these days. Like, oh, I didn't do it, right? Um, and you look at her legacy. She was like, she was a woman. Number one, her funeral was one of the most watched events in history, right? That should tell you something right there. But it's like she left a huge mark on the world. It's like when I think of greatness, number one, we don't have enough greatness today. Like that really bothers me a lot. But when I think about our greats, it's like that's what I want to strive for.
Mhm.
I want history to remember me. I don't want to be some blip, right? I
Mhm.
mean, technically, we're all going to be blips.
At some
200 years
point.
from now. Yeah, like 200 years from now, who's going to remember me and you and even like the queen? Okay, well, maybe they'll remember her, but like they're not going to remember most of us. But I can sure as heck try to make sure I'm a footnote somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like, and there was Kathlena the allergy chef.
Well, and I think, just the fact that from the bits that you've shared that it's not like you came from this place of I'm already like peak performance and now I'm just going for more. It's like it sounds like your start in life was pretty rough and you probably didn't have all of the money and the access and stuff to things that would have made it easy for you to achieve as much as someone else, right? So I think it's really especially inspiring to see someone in your situation between the upbringing and then also the physical health challenges, which that in and of itself can take someone out of the game, right? Like you don't even need to have had traumatic experience with, abusive, I don't know if you said parents or what, but like that abuse growing up, like just chronic illness can really get in the way of somebody pursuing what they feel is their mark on the world. So I think all of those things, each one of them could have been something that took you out of the game. So just the fact that you have been able to persevere with all of those factors that could have held you back is really impressive and inspiring. So thanks for sharing your story with
Right.
us.
It's funny you would use that word. When I was a kid, I used to win awards at school all the time. And one time I won an award for perseverance. Mind you, this is before I really understood the word. I was like first or second grade. And I looked at it and I was like, this is the dumbest award. I didn't tell anybody this, but I was thinking this, right? And it's always been an award that always stuck out to me. Like, why? Like, what? Later you realize what it really means. And you're like, I don't know about this one. But then, of course, now it's like, yeah, okay, maybe they saw something in me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're right. Like a lot of people tap out, and they turn to a life of poor coping mechanisms or just a lot of sadness and brokenness. And I feel for them because I could be them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm just grateful I'm not, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. Like I wish I could help everyone. Turns out I can't. A lot of people aren't ready for it yet. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm here when they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is kind of a trip, but you're
Mm-hmm.
right. I won't lie. I would not have minded having a healthy bank account growing up. That would have been nice.
Yeah.
But I
Just,
would have been such a nerd about it. I would have bought like books and stuff. Like I would have
I
been
mean, listen, those are valuable. I feel like you get more out of books than you get out of like fancy purses or cars and that kind of thing.
right.
So,
Yeah.
but actually, I feel like the perseverance thing, I could totally understand when you're a little kid, like not really getting the concept and being like, what does that mean? But I actually feel like the older I get, the more I see that as being a superpower because really, I mean, first of all, there is no end zone, right? Like I'm sure you've had this experience before where every time you accomplish something, it's like, okay, what's next? Like you were saying before, what's the real way I'm going to change the world? And I'm sure you've done some really awesome things, but it's always kind of like, but there's got to be more, right? So I don't feel like you ever get to this place where you're like, yes, I've done it and I'm good. And now I can just chill for the rest of my life. So I feel like that ability to persevere is really necessary for anyone to be able to maximize what they're able to do in their life. And not from a sense of like, you're not good enough unless you achieve these things. But I feel like where you're coming from, where you have that really strong conviction that you are here for a big reason. And like, that's what drives you as opposed to feeling like, well, I'm not lovable until I do XYZ. I don't get the impression that that's what you're chasing. I just feel like that combination of conviction and what you're here to do, and then that perseverance to push through a lot of really big barriers, I'm sure, things that anyone would be like, it's totally reasonable if you kind of like just want to hang out and you don't want to like pursue goals, right? Like you've been through a lot. Maybe you can just, rest or whatever. But I think a lot of people downplay that willingness to push through challenges and that willingness to not give up even when things aren't going well. And I feel like people want to celebrate the end result without really looking at, hey, like, why don't we celebrate what you've just been through, even if it's not the end, right? And I really admire how you're showing up even with all the stuff you've been through and still like looking for more ways that you can help people.
Yeah. And then, I mean, like, and we can apply that just to, like everyday things too, right? Like for the listener who's going through like awful depression or maybe like postpartum depression, right? Like she's living a hard life. Here she's got this baby she's got to care for, and she's still got to show up every day. And she's trying to figure out like what's wrong with me, even though there's technically nothing wrong with her. She just had a baby, and this is part of the process. And it's like, for her, perseverance looks a lot different. Perseverance is feeding her child and making sure said child stays healthy, like, and for her, that's the hardest thing she's going to do today. And it's like, we should celebrate her too, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we've got to look at, the kid who just goes to school when they just want to sit and listen to their emo music and not move from that spot on their beanbag chair, right? Today's child, I feel bad for today's kids because I think we had it easier technically. We didn't have all this digital nonsense hooked up to us 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
These kids have like a brainwashing device on them all the time, and they can't think straight,
Mm-hmm.
and then like we, it's easy because I'm guilty of it too, to look at these kids and go, get up and do something, right? And for them, it's like, it's hard to persevere and show up
Mhm.
when when you're constantly being bombarded, right? So it's like, and it's the dad who's got to work 3 jobs to support his family because maybe his wife is disabled and they've got 3 disabled kids on top of it or something. I don't know, like some crazy story. And
Mhm.
he's just got to go to work like a lot, and all these people are persevering whether they realize it or not.
Mhm.
And like you said, like we celebrate these end results. Well, like for the postpartum mom, what's her end result? The kid's a toddler now? Like, you know what I mean? Like what's the like and they're gonna keep going, right? The dad who goes to work, he's gotta keep working probably till he's like 95, and it just I don't know. We all have our stories to tell, but I think really what we should all do then when we go through these things, help the next guy out, right?
Mhm.
When you're the dad who's working the jobs and you've got all the things and you find some young man at work who's thinking about starting a family, mentor him,
Mhm.
give him some good advice. Like, hey, if you see this red flag, don't move forward.
Mhm.
Like tell him what to look out for. And if you're the postpartum mom or you were the postpartum mom, find the next postpartum mom and make her dinner, or help bathe her kid because her kid splashes everywhere and it freaks her out. I don't know. Like, like it's those little things that we can do. We can all be the hero,
Mhm.
believe it or not. And I
Mhm.
think we live in a world of comic books and superheroes, and we think that being a hero means, donning repulsors or a shield or whatever and having to do these big, mighty acts. But the truth is courage starts with these tiny steps, right? Like just these little baby steps. And we can all do them. And that doesn't mean we even have to do them every single day, right? Do one a week.
Mhm.
Because one step, one a week, that's 52 steps at the end of the year. That's more steps than doing nothing.
Mhm.
And then next year, take 2 steps a day. The year after, take 3 steps a day. Next thing you know, you're a big shot hero. You
Yeah.
know?
And as a postpartum mom, I think something that's really come up for me a lot lately is I guess the best way to describe it is just saying, like, this is it. Like, I know that as an entrepreneur, I don't know if you ever feel this way, but it's almost that constant, what's next? What's next? Like, what am I accomplishing next? And for me, with my baby and just seeing how fast she's growing already. And it's like, oh my gosh, you're already like, so much older than you were when you were born. Um, I look at her and I'm just like, this is literally it as far as what the goal is, what I'm
Mm,
experiencing right now. And it's hard for me because I'm a very goal-oriented person, but I'm like constantly reminding myself that like I'm not just trying to push to the next thing, right? I'm not just like, oh, just
mm,
as soon as she's crawling or as soon as she's walking or as soon as she's talking or like all the milestones that are coming for us with a child. It's like, no, this is literally my life right now in this moment. And like, this is the prize is getting to have this experience with this baby right now. And I feel like a lot of times the people I work with, especially in my coaching programs, it's like they're not okay with the circumstances because they're not big circumstances or not big results, big, like shiny, oh, look what I accomplished. It's like they're still in it. They're still in the hard stuff. They're still, balancing motherhood and business and all this stuff. And it's like, I think if we can really have that combination of like knowing that there's more and knowing that we have a bigger purpose that we're pursuing, but also like in the moment being like, and also my purpose right now is literally just sitting here with my baby, feeding her and like snuggling and smiling at her. It's like kind of
yeah,
having that balance, I feel like is it's difficult, but it is something where I, I hope that people aren't getting ahead of themselves to the point where they aren't enjoying their life now because they think enjoyment is at the end of some outcome that they're going to achieve, whether that's
yeah,
healing from an
yeah.
illness or reaching a milestone in their business or their kid being a certain age. Like I don't know. I just get nervous that I'm going to like wake up in 10 years and be like, I didn't even pay attention to my life because I was like always thinking about what was next. So I don't know
I
what
can tell you
inspired me to
from
think about that, but
Oh, but I mean, like you're definitely, people on the internet say I feel attacked, like as a joke, response to these memes or whatever. I don't know. Like you just called me out,
oh
whether you realize it or
no.
not, right? Like I'm no, like it's totally fine. Like, I mean, I'm cool. But I am so guilty, right? I am that person who's like, I mean, it's funny because you're describing like your baby and thinking about this is it right now. And of course, in my own head, I'm thinking, yeah, but she can make a list of like all the things like, well, I mean, if I smile at the baby enough times, then this is the result of doing that because now I'm promoting social development. And if I put on, audio files of different languages, I can start helping my baby's brain develop. Like I'm thinking about all these other things while you're like, no, let's just sit and smile at the baby. And there's something so good and right about it, like it's okay to just sit and smile at your baby. Like
Mhm.
I think we as overachievers, I'm sure you're an overachiever by nature as well. We get caught up in all the things, even the littlest things, right? I have a friend who, she wanted to nurse her second child and had to like say no because with the first child, she got so caught up in like the numbers of it all. Like, well, how much am I producing? Can I produce more today? And like became this crazy, weird competition with herself that she missed the experience. And then it creates this weird relationship with the child because you're describing smiling at your baby and how great that is and when the baby smiles back and creating this moment. But if you're so focused on all the other stuff, you don't get those moments. And
Mhm.
so where in my method, I'm like, oh, and let's think about this development and this development and this development and this development. Like I'm thinking about all the things. You're like, no, let me just nurture this little baby.
Mhm.
And I mean, and it's not to say like that my method doesn't nurture a baby. It does, right? But at the same time, it doesn't nurture the parent. And
Mhm.
it's this two-way street. And,
Yeah.
by us as parents allowing the child to essentially nurture us, it creates an even stronger, even better bond with this
Mhm.
child. And so it's no, it's true though, right? Like being present in the present, I think it's difficult for people like us.
Mhm.
It's hard.
And it's a double-edged sword, right? Because on the other hand, I like being someone who's goal-oriented and wants to achieve things, and I'm sure you're the same way. And it is making a difference in people's lives, right? So the fact that we are like even being on this podcast right now, like I'm sure there's other stuff we could be doing, but we know that this is going to help at least one person. And so it's like balancing that with, yeah, and I get to enjoy my life, right? Like, and I get to enjoy being a mom to a new baby or, having a high schooler or whatever, right? Like it's okay to enjoy that and it not have to be like towards a purpose, which is hard. I mean, and it's funny because even with the smiling at the baby, like sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to make sure I'm like setting up her nervous system for really good, like balance when she's older. So she's not like going to therapy at age 30, talking about how she was traumatized by some like unmemorable experience when she was 6 months old or whatever. So a little bit of pressure on myself there, but it's definitely more of the, okay, but let's also just like enjoy this moment because this is the only
And
moment that we
and
have.
don't we think about that now, right?
Mhm.
Because our parents never got all these mental health
Yeah,
messagings
no,
like
not
we
at
do
all.
now. And so now we're hyper aware of it and we're like, did I smile too much? Did I not smile enough? Right?
It's
Like,
like, did I leave her in her crib for too long and now she's like gonna have some like abandonment issue in her
right?
teens or something?
Yeah.
Gonna slow my roll on that one, but it is definitely a balance of, taking action and also just being okay with the journey. So well, Kathleen, I feel like we could probably keep talking for a long time, and we'll have to have you back on the show at some point to continue this conversation because it's been really fun just to like see where the conversation has gone. But I know that you have a business where you literally help people, and it sounds like primarily through a membership. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there are actually quite a few free resources on the website. If you go to goraise.net, and then of course you can go to the homepage and the menus are all there. And there's an option for free resources. There's like some free recipes, some really great articles. I cannot stress enough. Like if you don't know where to start, go to the free articles and just start reading through them. I mean, it's kind of weird because they're like backwards, how these websites work. So like the oldest ones might be actually where you want to start and then work your way
Mm.
forward. But either way, start on the free articles. Raise is a really cool membership website. And, not everybody needs to join. If you're only gluten free or only, say, peanut free, please don't join. Like, it's not for you because you already have so many resources. When we started Raise actually stands for Restricted Diet, Allergy, Intolerance, Special Diets such as Paleo, GAPS, AIPS, CD, and then the E is for EOE. We looked at every problem in the free from world and said, who does not have resources? And that's where we started, right? So if you're only looking for a gluten-free blog, go to like Mama Knows Gluten Free. she's only gluten-free, you know? If you have 3 or more restrictions though, it's gonna be so hard to find resources, and that's where we step in. Or if you have a special diet and an allergy. So like if you're soy-free vegan, whew, the world is not made for you, right? If you are nut-free paleo, the world is also not made for you. And
Mhm.
that's where we're stepping in to say, hey, the world can still exist for you.
Mhm.
Um, really the crown gem of the whole kingdom of what we do, it's the advanced recipe search. It's the most advanced food recipe search online for people in the free from world. It's got more than 85 filters. You can filter out individual allergens, food families, and groups, as well as special diets. And then you can also add in specialty filters. So you could say you're corn free, vegan, soy free, and you want it to be budget friendly, freezer friendly, and dinner. You could literally pop all that in. And
Wow.
the results that come up meet all of your needs because it's an and search, not an or search. So every recipe must meet all of your requirements to be displayed.
Mhm.
There's nothing like it out there in the world. When I said I wanted to change the world, I guess I started there, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, start at the free articles. I think it's a great place for people who are just looking for, general information. And then of course, lots of great guides. We've got safe product guides if you need to know like where to shop and what to shop for, and loads of recipes. I think there's like almost 600 recipes that are all free from on the website. And then just lots of like allergy seminars and corn free courses and all these different things that, people would, the way I like to describe Raise, it's everything you wish you knew the day you were diagnosed. It is, it is really your best friend in that it's like having me in your house
Mhm.
because you literally get everything that's in my brain right there on your computer. So
Mhm.
if you have a question, it's like, I wonder what Kathlena thinks about. Oh, there it is. That's what she thinks. And you get all these answers. So it's really cool. It's great for people who need it.
Yeah. Well, and we have a lot of nutrition professionals that listen to the show, and I would imagine that's a really great resource if you have clients with challenging food allergies. Because even as you're talking, I'm like, oh man, I remember when I used to work with people where I was trying to put a meal plan together for them, and it was all these really like unique and kind of conflicting foods
Yeah.
that, like you said, like nut free paleo or like, I'm trying to remember like, oh, I'm low FODMAP, but I'm also trying to eat more vegetables or, just random stuff like that that made it really hard.
What's really cool? Raise actually has a meal planning tool as well.
Yeah.
So, and we work with RDs and those types of people, to help with their clients and patients as well, because it's like a lot of them feel out of their depth.
Mhm.
I mean, for those who live with a dietary restriction of some sort, they're a lot more comfortable.
Mhm.
But one of the cool things about Raise is you, as a health professional, you can then sit down with your patient and say, okay, let's look at this together. Okay, let's plug in all your needs, and now we can build this meal plan for you, or now we can, do this or do that, and it's very doable. Like
Mhm.
it's honestly one of the best tools. Like when you're trying to help someone with restrictions, there aren't very many out there. Not only that, but because we also a lot of it's from scratch, right?
Mhm.
95% of the recipes are all scratch based. And so you go to a lot of these websites that are like gluten free, dairy free, or whatever, and like, now get your dairy free sour cream and get your gluten free bread buns and get your, gluten free crackers, and we're going to crush that. Like, no, 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 we're not doing any of that. We're
Mhm.
making real food with real ingredients you can actually pronounce. And if I need you to get a cracker first, I'm going to teach you how to make a cracker. Then we're going to use your crackers in the next recipe. Like, I take you through all the steps. We even have a whole section on just basics, because how many people are used to eating out? They get diagnosed as an adult and they're like, I don't even know how to chop an onion. I got you covered. I teach you how to
Mhm.
chop an onion. Like I'll take you through all the steps because everybody's got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I think as a professional helping people with unique dietary challenges, it's like I wouldn't even expect somebody to be able to figure that out as even a dietitian, because it's like when things get really complicated, it's totally different than just like, hey, it's gluten free, or hey, I need to just avoid dairy. Even as a professional, those are a lot easier to help somebody with than when you're trying to like layer all these different things that somebody can't eat or maybe needs to take a break from. So I feel like that resource would be super helpful for saving time and making sure that you're giving a meal plan that's actually appropriate for somebody, because there's nothing worse than being like, oh, I have this meal plan and I thought it was okay for you, but I forgot that you can't eat onions or whatever. And now I have to like go back and look at all this stuff and fix it. And, I just feel like having that as a resource would be really useful for professionals in addition to clients.
Just on a side note, there's a button for that too.
Yeah.
Onion free. We have a button for that. We actually have an onion free button, a garlic free button, and then an allium free button for those who have anything in the family. So like if you can still have leeks or shallot or whatever, you can hit the other one.
Nice.
Yeah, we literally tried to think of like all of them. But you get to a point where you're like, well, either there's going to be 400 buttons, one for every single ingredient known to man, or we need to start making some groups.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it's more customizable the more buttons there are, but you want to probably hit a balance of not overwhelming people. So, well, Kathlena, it's been so awesome to chat with you, and I'm sure there's going to be some people that want to connect with you further. So, I think I have in my notes that you are on Instagram. Is that the best way for them to follow you and connect with you?
Yeah, Instagram's going to be the best. I wish I could do all the other stuff. I'm just one person, you guys. Like, it's too much. Plus, I don't even really like Facebook. And I get that Instagram is owned by Facebook, but they weren't always.
Yeah. So, I don't hardly use Facebook, and I use Instagram, so I get it. And just so you guys are aware, if you are interested in checking out the Raise membership, we do have a discount code for you for 50% off. Your first month is FED50, which is FED50. So that's very graciously offered if you wanted to test it and see if it's going to work for you. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, sounds like maybe it's a month-to-month membership that people can use as they need it.
Cancel. The thing too, like if you do decide to try it out, even if you use the code, fill out the new member form. People don't realize this, but when you fill out that form, I literally sit down, review everything you told me, and I then write you a hyper customized response and point you to all the right things that you want to know right then. So fill out those new member forms.
Use that form, people.
Use the form.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been really fun to chat with you, Kathlena.
I loved it, and I hope to chat with you again one of these days.
Awesome. Well, thanks to all of you for hanging out with us. We'll see you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Are you a nutritionist or dietitian struggling to figure out how much to charge for your programs and services? Maybe you've heard that as a nutritionist, you should just charge what you're worth. But this way of thinking can cause you to either undercharge your clients or work yourself into the ground trying to earn your worth. As a healthcare provider, you can't set up a pricing structure that forces you to sacrifice your own health and well-being in the name of your business and your clients. But I promise it doesn't have to be this way. When you download my free profit planning workbook, I'll walk you step by step through the 10-step process for determining the right pricing for your nutrition business. As a nutritionist, you have the power to completely change someone's life for the better. There's huge value in that, so it's time to stop underselling what you do. By following along with this worksheet, you can determine exactly what you need to charge to achieve your revenue goals with ease. I'll teach you everything I've learned about pricing from growing my own nutrition business to over $250,000 in revenue annually and helping other dietitian and nutrition entrepreneurs hit their first $10,000 to $30,000 months and beyond. To get your free workbook, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/profit, PROFIT, and grab your copy today, so you no longer have to wonder how to set the right rates for your incredibly valuable nutrition services. That's lauraschoenfeld.com/profit. It's time to make the money that you deserve as a nutritionist, and I can't wait to help you get there.